Water resources are no less vital to our country than oil, gas or metals. That's what the president underscored in his September 2023 address when he called for the creation of a dedicated ministry. Nurzhan Nurzhigitov, formerly the governor of Zhambyl region, which had first-hand experience with severe water shortages, was appointed as its head. Since then, there were devastating floods, securing a $1 billion loan from the Islamic Development Bank, negotiating with neighboring countries over transboundary rivers, and much more. Today, all of these issues are managed right here at the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation. I am Uliana Ashimova, and you're watching The Profiles, a project by the Silkway channel. In this program, we don't just ask questions and get answers, we dive deeper. We're going to address both floods and droughts. How? We've outlined who is responsible for what. If someone uses water without a proper contract, they'll face fines. Will they be significant enough? Sometimes penalties are so low that people would rather pay the fine than follow the rules. We've increased the number of staff in our basin inspections by 1.5 times. Do you travel abroad often on business trips? Even if we had twice as much water available, poor management would still result in shortages. We have a clear sense of the approach we need to take. Nurzhan Nurzhigitov is the Minister of Water Resources and Irrigation. He assumed leadership at the time of the ministry's establishment. Nurzhan Muldiarullah, good afternoon. Thank you for making time to meet with us. My first question is about the creation of the ministry itself, which essentially had to be built from the ground up. What started as a small committee and department has now grown into a full-fledged ministry. I came across the report you released in September, marking a year since its formation, and I must say, the scale of work is truly impressive. How did you manage to achieve all of this as the minister? First of all, I am delighted to welcome you to the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation of the Republic of Kazakhstan. Yes, the ministry was established on September 1st, 2023 by a presidential decree separating it from the Ministry of Ecology and Natural Resources. To give you some context, there was already a Water Management Committee, which is still operational, and a small transboundary department focused on negotiation processes. Back then, the combined staff of these two entities was only about 40 people actively working. Fast forward to today, and the ministry's central office alone has grown to 183 employees. We've built a solid foundation with 14 fully operational departments, and we've significantly expanded our regional basin inspections. Previously, these inspections had just 98 staff members. Now, they've grown to 242. In total, we have 464 civil servants. On top of that, our subordinate organizations include the large Kassym-Jomart enterprise, which employs around 11,000 civilian workers. There's also the Kazakh Research Institute of Water Resources. Over the year, we've added 2 new institutes. The National Hydrogeological Service, Kaz Hydrogeology, a non-commercial joint stock company, and a large information and analytical center, also a non-commercial joint stock company. Altogether, our Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation now has over 12,000 people working across various areas, from managing and distributing water resources to their conservation and efficient use. And when it comes to hiring, on average, there are 7 applicants vying for each position. That's incredible.
7 человек. Если вот мы сейчас к качественному составу подойдем, да, у нас около 40% сейчас это специалисты, которые получили водное образование.
7 people per spot. As for the team's qualifications, about 40% of our staff have specialized water-related education. We're proud to have 4 PhD holders in water sciences, 4 candidates of sciences, and over 20 employees who studied abroad through the Bolashak program, just to name a few. We've worked hard to assemble a professional and highly qualified team at the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation.
Nurzhan Muldiarovich, вообще Казахстан сталкивался.
Nurzhan Muldiarula, Kazakhstan has faced some extreme challenges with devastating water shortages. As the governor of Zhambyl region, you must have experienced the harsh reality of water scarcity. And then in the spring of 2024, when the floods hit, you were already serving as Minister of Water Resources. We saw just how much water can overwhelm us and the destruction it can bring. If we manage our water resources effectively, build strong policies with neighboring countries, and address climate change, can we prevent these disasters? Or we can just minimize their impact?
Мы их предупреждаем, либо мы просто знаем, как их минимизировать.
Вот как раз 23-й год.
In 2023, for example, Zhambyl region suffered from a drought. It's important to note that 75% of the region's water comes from Kyrgyzstan, from the transboundary rivers.
По реке Чуй, по реке Талас. То же самое было в Кыргызстане. Там тоже воды не хватало. Да.
Exactly, the Shu and Talas rivers.
Согласно этим графикам подачи воды.
But Kyrgyzstan was also struggling with water shortages.
Не стали выполняться.
There were schedules for water distribution that had been agreed upon, but when there's no water, those schedules just don't hold up.
Для того, чтобы
At the time, as local authorities, we had to make decisions to minimize the impact.
в августе месяце всю воду взяли. Это было
For example, we drew water from the Kirov reservoir until August, something we chose to do because 70% of Zhambyl's farms are small, covering just 1 to 2 hectares of vegetables, or at most 5 hectares.
Казахстана вот подвергли.
Then came floods, which hit eastern, western, northern, and central Kazakhstan hard.
Да. И
It was one of the largest flooding events in the last 80 years.
уже
In response, the head of state tasked us with developing a comprehensive water management strategy.
этого года утвердили до 2030.
Earlier, we finalized the plan, which runs until 2030, outlining measures to address both floods and droughts.
С этими паводками и засухами.
Which ones?
Конкретно прописали функции центральных исполнительных органов, местных
We've clearly outlined who is responsible for what. Central authorities, local authorities, everyone's role is defined.
засухи. Мы, Министерство водных ресурсов,
Take floods and droughts, for example.
Гарс Сапар,
Our Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation is now working with the Ministry of Digital Development, Gharsh Sapara, and the Ministry of Ecology and Natural Resources to create an automated information system.
следующего года мы
This system will allow us to forecast water-related events. By spring, we'll be able to predict where floods are likely to occur, how much water will flow through specific regions, and which basins might be affected.
позволит
With this information, local authorities can prepare in advance. All of these measures are part of the 2024 to 2030 water resource management concept.
водными ресурсами.
We've also incorporated these guidelines into the water code, specifying what needs to be done in case of droughts or floods.
Кто что должен делать?
Everyone has a clear responsibility now. This wasn't the case before.
Раньше такого не было.
Да, это было
It used to be a reactive approach.
Да, пошли работать.
We used to tackle problems as they arose, but now we're moving toward a more systematic approach.
очень важный вопрос по финансированию инфраструктурных.
Let's talk about funding for water infrastructure, which is such a critical issue. It's obvious that we need new reservoirs, dams, and a whole range of infrastructure we currently don't have in order to manage our water resources effectively. I heard that you secured a loan of over $1 billion from the Islamic Development Bank. Can you confirm this? Will this money really be coming to Kazakhstan to support these crucial projects?
Ну, в первую очередь,
First, let me start by talking about the groundwork we've done. When the ministry was established, we spent September through December working with local authorities to take stock of all water-related facilities.
областей работали над инвентаризацией всех водных объектов.
You had to figure out what was missing and what you had.
Потом мы подготовили комплексный план развития водной отрасли. То есть в комплексном плане в каждой области прописали, что нужно делать. То есть это строительство водохранилища, это реконструкция.
Exactly. We completed a comprehensive inventory and then developed a detailed plan for advancing the water sector.
Мы эту концепцию постановления правительства утвердили.
This plan outlines what needs to be done in each region, building new reservoirs, reconstructing existing hydraulic structures, and overhauling irrigation systems already in place.
Институтов.
In August, we had this strategy approved by the government. The funding for this plan is coming from four main sources: the national budget, local budgets, international financial institutions, and private investment.
Переговоры с Исламским банком развития.
With that framework in place, we began discussions with the Islamic Development Bank in April.
Исламского банка мы им все объекты показывали.
They sent several teams to visit and review the projects, and in Baku, an agreement was signed between the government of Kazakhstan and the bank for $1,153 million to fund the first phase.
США на первый этап.
So that's just the first phase. Does that mean more is coming?
Климатически устойчивых водных ресурсов Республики Казахстан. Вот проект так называется.
The first phase is focused on developing climate-resilient water resources in Kazakhstan. The plan includes building 4 new reservoirs, restoring 2 hydraulic structures, and rehabilitating approximately 116 irrigation canals. The agreement is finalized and we're now moving full steam ahead with implementation. I'm confident that construction and installation work will begin next year.
Монтажные работы.
What about the second phase?
Будет так.
The second phase is going to be even bigger.
14.
It will involve building an additional 14 reservoirs, reconstructing more than 10 existing ones, and over 5,000 kilometers of irrigation systems.
5000 километров.
Given the larger scale, the funding required will also increase.
Сейчас мы занимаемся
Right now, we're focused on laying the groundwork for this next stage.
больше, потому что объем работы больше.
Parliament is currently reviewing the new water code. You've managed to prepare it so quickly and get it to the Majlis for discussion. It includes a lot of important measures that could really help bring order to water sector, particularly in tackling the black market for water. Could you explain what the current situation looks like?
Глава государства об этом говорил еще в 23 году, в сентябре.
The head of state highlighted this issue in his September 2023 address.
С момента создания нашего
We've certainly seen the problem, and since the ministry was formed, we've been working deliberately to address it.
нормативной правовой базы.
One of our key steps has been creating a strong legal foundation, the water code. In the new code, we've laid out provisions that allow our basin inspectors to investigate cases of water misuse, inefficiency, or unauthorized use, such as taking water without a formal agreement.
Договора на подачу воды используют это.
We're giving our basin inspectors broader authority, including investigative powers.
Функциями расследования.
This required a lot of groundwork.
Была проведена очень большая организация.
For example, we've increased the number of staff in our basin inspections by 1.5 times, from 98 to 242.
Теперь их стало 242.
Has it already expanded, or are you still waiting?
То есть я говорю про организационную работу, которую мы... Потом, сейчас мы материально-техническую базу улучшаем. Мы купили 20 автомобилей, хороших таких современных автомобилей. Мы сейчас им покупаем дроны, купили. Мы купили им ноутбуки, мы компьютеры купили.
It's already done.
Наш инспектор,
This is part of the preparatory work we've completed.
вот эти вот,
On top of that, we've been improving their equipment and resources.
детально принимать решения.
We've purchased 20 modern vehicles, drones, and laptops so inspectors can make decisions on the spot using these tools.
Мы создали новый комитет
This infrastructure is already in place and operational.
охраны
We've also established a new committee within the ministry. Its main focus is protecting water resources, which includes tackling the black market. Additionally, we're making changes to the administrative code. A new article will specifically address the black market for water. For instance, if someone uses water without a proper contract, they'll face fines. Or if someone exceeds the amount agreed upon in their contract, paying for one amount but taking more, they'll also be penalized. Even without these new amendments in place, we've already started addressing the issue under existing regulations. What about the fines? Will they be significant enough? Sometimes penalties are so low that people would rather pay the fine than follow the rules. Let me give you some numbers. This year, for example, our inspectors uncovered about 345 violations in the southern regions, resulting in fines totaling around 25 million tenge. But yes, I agree that these fines aren't particularly hefty. That's why we're working on introducing stricter penalties in the updated administrative code. Right now, we're actively discussing this with experts and Majlis members, focusing on how to make the fines impactful, something that will really make violators think twice. You've mentioned that even within your regional offices, there are employees who aren't exactly acting in good faith. That's true. To tackle this, we've set up our own audit department at the central office. The audit team is now working closely with the basin inspections to conduct thorough checks on our Kazakhstan branches. What are you checking for?
Допустим, заключение договоров. То есть обязательно, если крестьянское хозяйство воду получает, у него должен быть договор с Казахстаном.
One focus is on contracts. If a farm is receiving water, they must have a formal agreement, whether it's with Kazakh or another organization under local authorities. They're required to pay for the water they use, and we're making sure that's being enforced. Another key area is monitoring the volume of water being used. Contracts are for specific amounts, and if someone uses more than they've paid for, the additional amount must also be accounted for and charged. That's something we're checking closely. So far, our audit team has carried out inspections in Turkestan, Zhambyl, and Almaty regions. And yes, we found violations, some of them by our own staff. As a result, the head of the Zhambyl branch was dismissed, along with a district-level production manager. Several other of our employees have faced disciplinary or administrative action. This isn't just about keeping water users in line. It's also about ensuring that our own people understand their responsibilities and are held accountable. Another major priority is restoring irrigation systems, which is absolutely essential. Right now, we're dealing with significant water losses, not to mention cases where farmers are taking water directly from canals without authorization. Restoring these systems is critical, and we're making sure to include automation and digital means in the process. Eventually, every farm will need to have a meter installed, so water usage and payments are fully tracked and transparent. Is that not happening yet? We've started implementing automation and digital practices, but it's still not as widespread as we'd like. Once these systems are fully in place, issues like unauthorized usage or exceeding contracted amounts will pretty much resolve themselves. We're also partnering with a foreign company to use satellite monitoring. This technology allows us to track specific areas or farms and see exactly how much water they've actually used. And how does that work? The technology is already available and it's pretty effective. Of course, there's still a need for some ground-level data collection, where our specialists input certain information manually, and additionally, satellite monitoring. At the recent summit in Riyadh, our president made a powerful point during his speech. Water knows no borders. That couldn't be more true. Your ministry has been working closely with neighboring countries, and not just them. What negotiations are you currently involved in? Or have most of the issues been sorted out this year? The foundation for this work was laid back in 1992, when an agreement on the shared use of transboundary rivers was signed in Almaty at the level of heads of state. We also have active agreements with Kyrgyzstan, China, and Russia, signed at the governmental level. These agreements are operational and fully functional. Under these agreements, each country is allocated specific water quotas and allowances. Every year, we meet with our international partners at least twice to discuss and finalize the water distribution plans. There are two main periods we focus on: the non-growing season, which runs from October the 1st to April the 1st, and the growing season from April the 1st to October the 1st, when more water is needed. Demand peaks during the growing season, especially for agriculture. Of course, industry and drinking water supplies require a steady flow year-round, but agriculture operates on these two distinct cycles. That's why it's so important for us to meet twice a year to coordinate schedules. This year, our ministry held over 30 meetings with our partners as part of these agreements. I'm happy to report that Kazakhstan received 100%, and in some cases, even slightly more, of the water allocated under the agreements. We also take our commitments seriously and fulfilled 100% of our obligations to our partners this year. Now, we're already gearing up for the next cycle. We've even held our first meeting for the upcoming non-growing season with Central Asian countries in Ashgabat. This was part of the Interstate Commission for Water Coordination, ICWC, where we worked out how much water each country will receive from the Sirdarya basin during this period. As the Ministry of Water Resources, do you often travel abroad on business trips? Only when it involves transboundary water cooperation. The reason I'm asking is that it's not easy to catch you even in Astana. It took us quite some time to coordinate this meeting. Does that mean you spend most of your time traveling around Kazakhstan? That's right. I travel extensively across the regions, and for good reason. Securing water is just one part of the job. The real challenge comes next, making sure it's distributed effectively. Within Kazakhstan, you mean? Exactly. It's about properly managing the water between users and recipients. Let me give you an example. Take the Sirdarya River in the Kızılar'da region. Here, water is distributed among three main groups. The first group is farmers, primarily rice growers. This region is the only one in Kazakhstan where rice is cultivated. This year, we allocated 3.5 billion cubic meters of water just for irrigating rice and other crops. The second group is tied to the restoration of the Northern Aral Sea, which has been a long-standing issue. Over the years, the sea has lost a significant amount of water. But in the last year and a half, we've managed to raise its volume to nearly 22 billion cubic meters, a remarkable achievement. During our commission meetings, we negotiate the amount of water that needs to be directed to the Northern Aral during the non-growing and growing seasons. This year, we allocated over 2.2 billion cubic meters in total, with 1 billion cubic meters sent during the growing season. To put that into perspective, in the past 5 to 10 years, the most water sent during the growing season was around 300 to 400 million cubic meters. This year, we've supplied nearly 3 times that amount. As a result, the water level in the Aral Sea is rising, and we're determined to continue this progress. The third group consists of a network of more than 60 lakes along the Sirdarya River. These lakes are vital for the local communities, supporting activities like fishing, aquaculture, and even tourism. Ensuring they have enough water is equally important. Even if we had twice as much water available, poor management would still result in shortages.
А что вы делали?
What was your first day like as minister?
В первый день это было 13-й подъезд. Меня туда в кабинете, я до сих пор помню.
I still remember it vividly. It was in entrance 13 where I was introduced to what was then a very small team.
Надо было знакомиться.
My first priority was getting a handle on the enormous challenges that had built up in the water sector over the years.
Очень активно заниматься.
From the very first day, we hit the ground running.
Мы начали активно заниматься.
One of our immediate tasks was to dive into drafting the new water code.
Внутреннее содержание.
At the same time, we began shaping the ministry's structure and laying out a long-term concept for water resource management, looking ahead to 2030.
Формирование
We also started work on a comprehensive development plan for the water sector covering the period through 2028.
документов,
These three key documents were the foundation we needed to move forward.
мы должны дальше работать.
Once the ministry was fully set up and staffed, we turned our attention to improving the material and technical resources at Kazakh, which employs over 11,000 people.
То есть это непосредственно те люди.
These are the individuals on the ground responsible for distributing water and keeping our irrigation systems in working order.
Ирригационных систем
The work we started that day hasn't let up since then.
сегодняшнего дня.